As a kid, I used to love watching the Winnie the Pooh cartoon. And as I got a little bit older, I started to really fall in love with horror movies and horror fiction, which I think perfectly sums up today's topic. If you're a horror fan and you're following the news, you no doubt heard about the Steamboat Willie horror film, the sequel to Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey, and a recently announced Peter Pan and Bambi horror film. I thought it would be interesting to put this new horror trend into perspective, but more importantly, what we can take away from this evolution in the horror genre. So, briefly, let's discuss what the public domain is and how it's being used in the horror genre lately. When a copyright either expires or was never renewed, this is what's called entering the public domain. As the name implies, you, the public, owns these works. That means you're free to use that piece of media any way you want. Famously, or rather infamously, the seminal horror classic Night of the Living Dead, through mismanagement, has always been in the public domain. That's why when you watch a TV show or a movie, particularly in the horror genre, they generally will use Night of the Living Dead or a silent horror film because it's free to use. Some scholars, however, believe that this particular film being in the public domain is actually a good thing because it made it so accessible. One such scholar is Joe Bob Briggs, who made a really convincing argument for the film's popularity being due to being in the public domain. January 1st, 2022. This is when the earliest version of Winnie the Pooh entered the public domain. Sure, this comes with some limits. You can't use the same design that Disney currently owns. This means no iconic red shirt, and probably safe to tweak the design slightly. After that, you are good to go. Some ambitious filmmakers saw dollar signs and decided to be the first to make a horror version of this beloved children's story. Enter filmmaker Rise Wakefield. Talking to IndieWire, Wakefield said, wisely, part of the budget was spent securing legal help. One smart piece of advice was to keep the characters from talking. This would help the filmmakers avoid a sticky copyright infringement claim. After all, Disney is rather notorious for protecting their property. Suddenly, huge outlets were covering this little low budget movie. In the same interview with IndieWire, Waterfield candidly stated that he thought this would be a one and done fun horror movie, but he never dreamed that the movie would take off like this. On a modest budget of $100,000, the film currently has made over 5.2 million. This success led to the film having a wider theatrical release, something almost unheard of for small horror movies like this. Now, for further context, I would say 2022 and 2023 was a pretty special year for little indie horror films making a staggering profit. For example, Skinamarink made an impressive amount of money on a shoestring budget. This was thanks to an inventive plot, amazing atmosphere, and thanks to a leaked copy from its festival screening. Side note, a screening I legit seen that year, um, took to TikTok and became viral in there. Terrifier 2 also did really well, making a staggering $15 million on a $15,000 budget. Also in 2022 was The Mean One, which I think is an interesting case And though it's not technically a public domain horror title, I wanted to lump it in because technically The Grinch is not in the public domain yet. However, working under the Parody slash Fair Use Act and most likely getting legal professional help, the director of that film was able to find a clever way around some copyright issues. Like Blood and Honey, this low budget horror film also turned a nice profit and earning almost $1 million and currently has a DVD and Blu ray release. And just like that, we are hearing that a Steamboat Willie horror movie is indeed in the works. Recently, the horror site Bloody Disgusting got a first look at a dark Peter Pan movie, and it's been confirmed that a evil Bambi movie is in the works as well. So, like it or not, the genie is out of the bottle, and we are likely to see a lot more of these films. So, are these gimmick movies? Well, I think the easy answer is of course, duh. Clearly, the marketing for movies like Blood and Honey and The Mean One works so well because of the interest these projects drummed up. I might be over generous in saying this, but it feels like Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey does have some effort put into it. I think the sticking point for myself and other horror fans is this movie's existence is cynical from the start. It seems to only exist to take advantage of the viral news of a kid's property being transformed into a horror film. Sure, Wakefield's movie does rely on a gimmick, but his movie isn't without merits. After all, he was the first person to take a strictly for kids IP and totally recontextualize it for an entirely different audience. Now, filmmakers seeing dollar signs are no doubt going to flood the market with similar films. If any of them are actually good, well, only time can tell. It's hard not to feel like most, if not all, of these upcoming movies are going to be lazy, poorly written, and just exist to make a quick buck. And as harsh as that may sound, I think that's a valid concern. But the other side of the coin is, as rightly cynical as some of these might be, there's something beautiful about the way the public domain is currently being used. After all, we the people should be able to own and by extension be able to remix art as we see fit. So I see this as an exciting time for people to create and enjoy media that now belongs to everybody. Ironically, it was the Walt Disney Company that years ago lobbied successfully to extend the copyright laws in the first place. And I gotta tell you, this makes the fact that Mickey is slipping from their fingers, or at least an older version of him, all that more delicious.
Oh God, it's so good. So good. So good and tasty. Mmm,
Like it or not, this horror trend is here to stay, for now. And however you feel about these movies, I think it's amazing that we get to own these characters and have a space to create whatever our hearts desire. Even if that means Winnie the Pooh whipping Christopher Robin with Eeyore's tail. I really hope you enjoyed this video essay. I thought this was such an interesting topic, and I know that there is so much more you can learn about the public domain and how copyright works. But I didn't want this to be really dry, and I think it's way more interesting how the public domain law is being used than the law itself. However, if you do want to do a little bit more research, I can link in the description some more resources. And as always, I try to be very transparent with my sources, and I will link those in the description as well. I just want to know what y'all think. Do you like any of these movies? Should I reevaluate some of these? Am I being too harsh? Are you excited for any of these upcoming films? Please weigh in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.